The biting autumn wind clawed at my exposed skin, but the chill radiating from the locker room tiles cut deeper. A familiar ache throbbed behind my ribs, a dull echo of the blows that had just landed. My knuckles, still clenched, dug into the cold concrete floor. A metallic tang, coppery and sharp, coated my tongue. They had left, their taunts fading down the corridor, leaving behind only the acrid scent of their dominant alpha pheromones. Thick and cloying like cheap perfume. I pressed my face against the cool, grimy surface, a desperate attempt to staunch the hot tears that threatened to spill. The humiliation felt like a physical weight, pressing me into the floor. Recessive alpha. The words were a brand seared into my very core. They meant weak, useless, a pale imitation of what an alpha should be. In this elite academy, where bloodlines and secondary genders determine one's place, my existence was an anomaly, a stain on the polished marble halls. A faint scent, like jasmine after a spring rain, drifted into the stale air. It was light, almost imperceptible, yet it cut through the lingering stench of my tormentors. Footsteps, soft but deliberate, approached. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing the floor would swallow me whole. Another round of ridicule. I couldn't bear it. A shadow fell over me. I flinched, bracing for impact. What's wrong with being a recessive? The voice was cool, clear, like a bell chime in the quiet. It held no pity, no judgment. Only a quiet certainty that made my breath catch. I slowly lifted my head, my vision blurred by unshed tears. Su Xia. He stood over me, his pristine white uniform immaculate, not a single crease out of place. His dark hair, parted neatly, framed a face sculpted from marble, all sharp angles and elegant lines. His eyes, the color of wet obsidian, held a detached curiosity, not the usual disdain or pity the first was accustomed to. He was a dominant omega, a rare and prized commodity in our world, protected and admired by everyone, especially the dominant alphas who orbited him like eager satellites. He was everything I wasn't: powerful, respected, utterly untouchable. He knelt, his movements fluid, unhurried. He didn't offer a hand, didn't fuss. His gaze, steady and unwavering, met mine. We all eat the same rice. The words hung in the air, simple, profound. They weren't a question, but a statement of undeniable truth. My chest tightened, a strange sensation blossoming amidst the pain. It wasn't comfort he offered, but a quiet, almost defiant logic. He saw past the labels, past the social strata to the fundamental sameness beneath. I stared at him, my throat tight, unable to form a coherent response. My tears, which I had fought so hard to suppress, finally spilled, tracing hot paths down my cheeks. This wasn't pity. This was something else entirely. It was the first time someone had ever looked at me, a recessive alpha, and seen a person, not a defect. He watched my tears without flinching, without offering a hand to wipe them away. There was a quiet dignity in his stillness, a respect for my raw vulnerability. When the first wave of sobs subsided, he simply stood, a silent sentinel. "Get up," he instructed, his voice still even. "The bell will ring soon." He turned and walked away, his jasmine scent fading, leaving me alone again, but not entirely. His words, his unwavering gaze, had planted a seed in the barren landscape of my self-worth. In that moment, amidst the pain and the shame, a different emotion took root, silent and profound. I watched him go, his elegant form disappearing around the corner. A strange warmth spread through me, a quiet, insistent beat in my chest. Love. It was a fragile, impossible thing, blooming in the most unlikely of places for the most unattainable of people. 10 years. The high school lockers, the taunts, the stinging humiliation, all faded into the distant hum of memory. Yet the image of Su Xia, kneeling before me, his eyes holding that quiet certainty, remained as vivid as the day it happened. That day had marked the beginning of everything. Our relationship, a delicate tapestry woven from stolen glances, hushed whispers, and clandestine meetings, had become the bedrock of my existence. It was a secret, fiercely guarded, hidden beneath layers of public indifference and carefully constructed alibis. In the glittering world of the upper district, Su Xia was the golden omega, destined for a prestigious match, his life meticulously planned by his powerful family. In the cramped, bustling lower district, I was just Xie Yan, a quiet, unremarkable young man, working tirelessly to carve out a meager living. No one would ever suspect. No one could. Our rendezvous points were always chosen with meticulous care. The hidden alcove in the city's oldest library, smelling of aged paper and dust, where we would sit side by side, his knee brushing mine, our hands occasionally finding each other beneath the heavy tomes. The deserted park bench overlooking the city lights, where we would share silence, the vast expanse of the metropolis, a silent witness to our illicit intimacy. Or, most often, my small, one-room apartment in the lower district, a sanctuary from the prying eyes of his world. He would arrive late, his expensive car parked blocks away. a dark hoodie pulled low over his aristocratic features. The moment he stepped through my door, the tension that clung to him like a second skin would begin to unravel. His sharp-tongued wit, usually a defense mechanism, would soften into playful teasing. His elegant posture would relax, shoulders slumping slightly. He would shed his tailored jacket, revealing the simple, soft fabrics he wore beneath. A stark contrast to his public persona. I would watch him, my heart a steady drum against my ribs. He would pace my small living space, his fingers tracing the worn spines of my books, the chipped edges of my ceramic mugs. He never commented on the humble surroundings, never hinted at the vast chasm between our worlds. He simply existed within it for a few precious hours, as if it were his own. "You're late," I would murmur, a smile playing on my lips as I pulled him into my arms. Inhaling the familiar jasmine scent, now laced with the faint, metallic tang of the city. His dominant omega pheromones, usually tightly controlled, would bloom subtly around me, a silent confession of trust and vulnerability. He would lean into my embrace, his head resting against my shoulder, a sigh escaping his lips. Traffic was a nightmare, or perhaps my family's latest potential suitor meeting ran long. His voice, usually so composed, held a faint edge of weariness. I would trace patterns on his back, feeling the tension slowly melt from his rigid frame. "Another one?" He would pull back, his eyes flashing with a familiar indignation. A pompous alpha from the Lay Corporation. He droned on about his quarterly profits for an hour, then had the audacity to suggest I be a perfect ornament for his estate. His lip curled in disgust. "An ornament, Xie Yan, as if I'm some gilded statue." I would press a soft kiss to his temple, my touch a quiet reassurance. "You are more than an ornament, Su Xia." He would look up at me then, his obsidian eyes softening, a vulnerability I rarely saw in public shining through. "Only with you, I am." Our love wasn't grand pronouncements or public displays. It was in the shared silence, the knowing glances, the quiet understanding that flowed between us. It was in the way he confided in me, the true burdens of his life, the expectations that weighed him down. It was in the way I listened, offering not solutions, but unwavering support, a steady presence in his chaotic world. I had watched him grow from the composed high school student to the elegant, sharp-witted man he was today. And he, in turn, had watched me shed the skin of the bully boy, slowly, painstakingly, into the man who dared to hold him, to love him. My quiet stubbornness, once a source of ridicule, had transformed into an enduring strength, a silent promise to him. Our secret was a fragile thing, constantly threatened by the world outside. His family's relentless pursuit of a suitable match, the societal pressures that demanded he fulfill his role as a dominant omega, the ever-present risk of exposure. But in my small apartment, away from the glittering towers and the judgmental eyes, we were just Su Xia and Xie Yan, two souls finding solace and love in each other's arms. For 10 years, this fragile, impossible love had endured, a testament to the quiet power of two hearts beating as one, against all odds. I knew my love for him was an anchor, keeping him grounded amidst the tempest of his life. And I knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that I would do anything to protect it. The news arrived not with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating efficiency of a well-placed bomb. Su Xia's engagement. The city's gossip columns, usually a cacophony of trivialities, had exploded with the announcement, their glossy pages showcasing a meticulously staged photograph, Su Xia impeccably dressed, a faint, polite smile gracing his lips, standing beside Dingfang, the heir to the colossal Sterling Group. Dingfang exuded an aura of predatory calm, his eyes, dark and unreadable, fixed on the camera lens. The headline screamed about the merging of two dynasties, a strategic alliance, a love story for the ages. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. Love story. The words tasted like ash. I saw the picture everywhere. On the newsstands, flashing across massive LED screens above bustling intersections, even on the tablet of a stranger on the subway. Each time, a fresh wave of dread washed over me, cold and relentless. He looked like a porcelain doll, beautiful, expensive, and utterly devoid of life. The smile was a mask, expertly crafted, betraying nothing to the casual observer. But I knew him. I knew the subtle tension in his jaw, the almost imperceptible tremor in his hand as it rested possessively on Dingfang's arm. He was trapped. The visits to my apartment grew more frequent, more desperate. He would arrive, a ghost of his former self, the jasmine scent around him tinged with something acrid, almost like ozone, the dominant alpha pheromones of Dingfang, clinging to him like a shroud. He rarely spoke of the engagement directly, not at first. Instead, he would collapse onto my worn sofa, his eyes vacant, staring at the peeling paint on my ceiling as if searching for answers in its imperfections. One evening, he arrived soaked to the bone, the rain plastering his expensive suit to his lean frame. He didn't bother to remove his shoes, leaving muddy tracks across my small braided rug. His face was pale, his lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. He walked straight into my arms, his body trembling, and buried his face in my chest. The scent of his distress, sharp and overwhelming, filled my senses. "They're suffocating me," he choked out, his voice muffled against my shirt. "Every breath feels like a lie." I held him tighter, my hand stroking his damp hair, feeling the frantic beat of his heart against my own. He wasn't just talking about the engagement. He was talking about his entire life. The gilded cage his family had built around him, each bar meticulously crafted from expectation and obligation. The engagement to Dingfang was merely the final, unyielding lock. He told me about the endless meetings, the society galas where he was paraded like a prize, the carefully curated public appearances designed to project an image of perfect happiness. He described Dingfang's cold efficiency, his possessive gaze, the way he would subtly guide Su Xia's conversations, his movements, even his thoughts. It was a control so insidious, so pervasive, Su Xia felt his very essence dissolving. "He watches me," Su Xia whispered one night, his eyes wide and haunted in the dim light of my apartment. He was curled against me on my narrow bed, his usually sharp voice reduced to a fragile thread. "Always, even when he's not there, I feel his eyes." My hand tightened around his. The thought of Dingfang's gaze, that cold, strategic assessment, lingering on Su Xia, sent a jolt of icy rage through me. I was a recessive alpha, dismissed and overlooked, but in that moment, the protective instinct surged, primal and fierce. He sought refuge in the mundane rhythms of my life. He would watch me cook, his head resting on my shoulder, inhaling the simple scents of garlic and ginger. He would help me wash dishes, his elegant hands, usually reserved for signing documents or holding delicate teacups submerged in soapy water, clumsily scrubbing a plate. He never complained about the small space, the worn furniture, the constant hum of the city outside my window. Here, he was just Su Xia, not the sterling groups intended, not the heir to a vast fortune, but simply a man seeking solace. He would sometimes fall asleep in my arms, his breathing evening out, the tension easing from his brow. I would lie awake, listening to the soft murmur of his breath, feeling the steady beat of his heart against my own. In those moments, he was wholly mine, free from the suffocating grip of his world. And I, for those brief hours, was not just a recessive alpha, but his protector, his confidant, his only sanctuary. The subtle changes in Su Xia were not lost on Dingfang. He was an alpha who saw everything, calculated everything. He would have noticed the moments Su Xia's smile didn't quite reach his eyes, the slight hesitation in his voice when discussing their future, the way his gaze would occasionally drift, distant and yearning. Dingfang was a hunter, and Su Xia, for all his outward composure, was a bird struggling in a gilded cage. A bird whose song, however faint, was heard by someone else. The first sign of Dingfang's suspicion came in the form of an anonymous message, delivered to my archaic flip phone. A picture of Su Xia, leaving my apartment building in the early hours of the morning, his face obscured by the hood of his jacket. The message was simple, chilling, careful, Xie Yan. Some secrets have a habit of flying too close to the sun. No sender, no timestamp, just the stark warning. My blood ran cold. I showed it to Su Xia. His face pale, the color draining from his lips. He crumpled the phone in his hand, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. "He's watching me," he whispered again, the words laced with a new layer of fear. "He knows." My own fear was quickly overshadowed by a hardening resolve. Dingfang was playing a dangerous game. He was trying to intimidate me, to scare me away. But Su Xia was my world. I wouldn't be scared. A week later, the direct confrontation came. I was leaving my office, the fluorescent lights of the accounting firm casting a sickly pallor on my face. The day had been long, filled with columns of numbers and the drone of air conditioning. As I stepped out into the crisp evening air, a sleek, black sedan, impossibly polished, idled at the curb. Its tinted windows, impenetrable and dark, gave no hint of its occupant. A figure emerged from the driver's side, tall and imposing, his expensive suit tailored to perfection. Dingfang. His presence alone was a statement, a silent assertion of power. He didn't smile. His eyes, the color of polished steel, assessed me with a clinical detachment that sent a shiver down my spine. He was utterly devoid of warmth. "Xie Yan, I presume." Dingfang's voice was smooth, cultured, each word perfectly articulated, carrying the weight of generations of privilege. It was not a question. I stopped, my worn messenger bag slung over my shoulder, the contrast between a stark, my cheap, mass-produced shirt against his bespoke silk, my tired, unassuming face against his chiseled, aristocratic features. He was everything I was not, and yet, in that moment, I felt no fear, only a quiet, simmering defiance. "Dingfang," I acknowledged, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor that wanted to run through me. He took a step closer, his dominant alpha pheromones, sharp and authoritative, pressing down on me. It was a subtle intimidation tactic, designed to make a recessive alpha like me instinctively recoil to submit. My stomach clenched, my body's primal response screaming at me to avert my gaze, to back down. But I met his eyes, unblinking. "Let's not waste each other's time," he began, his tone devoid of emotion. "You are an inconvenience, a minor distraction." He paused, letting his words hang in the air, allowing their weight to settle. He watched my face, searching for a crack, a sign of weakness. He found none. "Su Xia is to be my omega," he continued, his voice hardening, each word a hammer blow. "His future is with me. His position is beside me. You understand the implications of this, I trust?" I understood. He was telling me to disappear, to relinquish the only true happiness I had ever known. "I understand, Su Xia," I stated, my voice low, steady. "And I understand what he needs." A flicker, a momentary tightening around Dingfang's eyes, a hint of surprise, perhaps, that I dared to speak back, that I dared to challenge him. "What he needs," Dingfang sneered, a cold, humorless smile touching his lips, "is stability, prosperity, a secure future that you, Xie Yan, can never provide. He needs a partner who can elevate him, not drag him down into the squalor of your existence." His gaze swept over my modest attire, my tired face, the subtle lines of worry etched around my eyes. It was a calculated insult, a deliberate attempt to remind me of my place, of my perceived inadequacy. My hands clenched at my sides. The heat of indignation, hot and fierce, spread through me. Squalor. He dared to dismiss my entire life, my honest struggles, as squalor. "He comes to me for comfort," I said, my voice unwavering, "when your world suffocates him. He comes to me for honesty when your world demands lies." Dingfang's eyes narrowed. The subtle scent of his anger, like ozone before a storm, intensified. He was not used to being challenged, especially not by someone he considered beneath him. "You speak of comfort," he bit out, his voice sharp, losing its veneer of polite condescension. "I offer him a kingdom. You offer him a hovel and a fleeting, childish fantasy." He took another step, closing the distance between us, his imposing frame casting a long shadow over me. "Step away from him, Xie Yan, now, before you force my hand." His words were a threat, clear and unequivocal. The implication hung heavy in the air. "I can crush you. I can make you disappear." Every instinct screamed at me to back down, to protect myself. But the image of Su Xia, trembling in my arms, his voice choked with despair, flashed before my eyes. "I will not," I said, my voice firm, each word a stone. My gaze locked with his, unwavering. "I will not step away from him." Dingfang's expression hardened, his lips pressing into a thin, furious line. The scent of his anger intensified, thick and suffocating. He studied me for a long moment, a predator assessing its prey, his mind undoubtedly calculating the various ways he could dismantle me. He had expected fierce subservience. He had found stubborn defiance. "You are making a grave mistake, Xie Yan," he finally said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "A mistake you will regret." He turned, a swift, decisive movement, and re-entered his car. The engine purred to life, a low, menacing growl. The sedan pulled away from the curb, its dark windows reflecting the city lights. A silent, ominous promise of what was to come. I stood there, alone on the sidewalk, the cold night air biting at my exposed skin. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum. My palms were sweaty, my body still thrumming with the adrenaline of the confrontation. Dingfang's words echoed in my mind, a chilling premonition. He would not let this go. The tension had not merely escalated, it had snapped taut, a wire stretched to its breaking point. I had dared to challenge him, to stand between him and what he considered his. The game had changed. It was no longer a secret affair. It was a battle. And I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that Dingfang would fight dirty. But I also knew I would not yield. Not for Su Xia. Never for Su Xia. The memory of Dingfang's cold, steel-eyed gaze lingered, a phantom pressure against my skin. His words, sharp and precise, echoed in the quiet of my apartment, each syllable a calculated blow. "Squalor. Inconvenience. A mistake you will regret." The confrontation had left me with a strange cocktail of adrenaline and a gnawing unease. I had stood my ground, my defiance a shield against his intimidation. But the aftermath, the quiet hours that followed, brought a different kind of clarity, a brutal, unvarnished truth. Su Xia arrived later that night, a hurried shadow slipping through the rain-slicked streets. He smelled of anxiety and the faint, unsettling trace of Dingfang's dominant alpha pheromones, clinging to him like a second skin. He didn't ask about my day, didn't comment on the lingering tension in my shoulders. He simply collapsed onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands, his body trembling. "He knows," he choked out, his voice hoarse, raw with fear. "He knows everything. He showed me pictures of me, leaving here. He threatened my family. He threatened you." My heart squeezed, a cold hand gripping my lungs. I had known Dingfang would retaliate, but the ruthlessness of his methods, the casual cruelty of targeting Su Xia's family, struck me with a fresh wave of disgust. I sat beside him, pulling him into my arms, stroking his hair. His fear was palpable, a live thing thrumming beneath his skin. He said he would ruin them, Su Xia continued, his voice a broken whisper. Everything they built. He said he would make sure I understood the consequences of this. He gestured vaguely between us, his hand trembling. I held him tighter, my own resolve hardening. Dingfang was a monster, cloaked in designer suits and inherited power. But as I listened to Su Xia's terrified confessions, as I felt the fragile weight of his body against mine, a different, more insidious realization began to dawn. It settled in my gut, cold and heavy, a truth I had consciously avoided for too long. He came to me when Dingfang suffocated him. He sought my comfort, my silence, my unassuming world as an escape. My small apartment, my simple meals, my quiet presence, they were a balm, a temporary reprieve from the gilded cage of his life. I was his sanctuary, his emotional release valve. But I was not his solution. I was not his path to freedom. I was merely a detour, a secret indulgence that, in the end, only deepened his entanglement. The next few days were a blur of internal turmoil. I watched him, truly watched him, with a new, painful objectivity. He would arrive, exhausted, his eyes shadowed, seeking solace. We would talk, or sometimes just sit in comfortable silence, his head on my shoulder, his hand in mine. He would find a moment of peace, a brief respite from the relentless pressure. Then he would leave, slipping back into the night, back into the world that was slowly crushing him. Each time he left, the scent of Dingfang's pheromones, faint but persistent, would linger in my apartment, a cruel reminder of the reality he returned to. I saw the pattern, stark and undeniable. He was using me, unintentionally perhaps, but effectively as a coping mechanism. My love, my unwavering support, my very existence had become a soft landing for him, allowing him to endure the unbearable. But by providing that escape, I was, in a way, enabling his continued imprisonment. I was not empowering him to break free. I was merely making the chains feel less tight. The thought was a shard of ice in my heart. I loved him with a fierce, quiet devotion. He was the sun in my otherwise unremarkable life. The reason I had dared to believe in something more, to consider myself anything less than his everything, his ultimate partner, felt like a betrayal of my own heart. Yet, the truth was undeniable. My love, in this context, was not setting him free. It was allowing him to remain trapped, caught between two worlds, unable to fully commit to either. He needed to face his reality, raw and unadorned. He needed to feel the full, crushing weight of his situation, without the soft cushion of my embrace. Only then, I realized with a fresh wave of agony, could he find the strength to fight, to make a choice, to truly reclaim his life. And that choice, I knew, might not include me. The decision was the hardest I had ever made. It felt like tearing a part of my own soul. Each beat of my heart was a dull throb of protest. But the image of Su Xia, pale and trembling, haunted me. His life was not a game. His future was not a fleeting moment of stolen intimacy. He deserved to live, truly live, not just exist in an endless cycle of anxiety and temporary relief. He came to me one evening, his usual weariness etched deeper onto his face. He had just returned from a mandatory dinner with Dingfang's parents, a performance of future domestic bliss he had to endure. He slumped onto my sofa, not even bothering to kick off his polished shoes. The jasmine scent around him was almost completely overshadowed by the heavy, suffocating scent of Dingfang's dominant pheromones like a dark cloud. Another evening of polite smiles and veiled threats, he murmured, his voice flat, devoid of its usual sharp-tongued wit. He ran a hand through his hair, his movements slow, heavy. I feel like I'm drowning, Xie Yan. My chest constricted. This was it. The moment I dreaded. The words I had rehearsed 1,000 times in my head. Each time feeling like a betrayal. I sat opposite him, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, anchoring myself. Su Xia, I began, my voice steady, though my insides churned. This cannot continue. He looked up, his eyes, usually so expressive, now dull and vacant. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. What are you talking about? Us, I clarified, the word catching in my throat, tasting like ash. This. Our secret. He sat up straighter, a sudden tension seizing his body. What do you mean? His voice was sharper now, a hint of the familiar fire returning, fueled by a nascent fear. You are engaged to Dingfang, I stated, my gaze unwavering, forcing myself to be brutally honest. You are expected to marry him. Your family's future, your position, everything depends on it. But you know why, he protested, his voice rising, a desperate plea. You know I don't want it. You know I hate it. And you come here, I continued, my voice firm, to escape it, to find a moment of peace. But that peace is temporary. It's a reprieve, not a solution. I leaned forward, my voice dropping, imbued with a quiet intensity. You are using me, Su Xia. Unintentionally, I know. But you are using our love as a way to avoid facing your reality. To avoid making a choice. His face paled, the color draining from his lips. His eyes widened, a mixture of shock and disbelief. Using you, he whispered, the words laced with hurt. How can you say that? I love you, Xie Yan. You are the only thing keeping me sane. And that's precisely the problem, I countered, my voice cracking slightly, the pain in my chest almost unbearable. I'm keeping you sane enough to endure the unbearable. I'm making it easier for you to stay in a situation that is destroying you. I'm not helping you fight. I'm helping you cope. He stood then, his movements abrupt, his shoulders rigid. His dominant omega pheromones, usually subtle around me, flared with distress, a sharp, metallic tang. So, what are you saying? His voice was dangerously low, a tremor running through it. That this is my fault. That I'm the problem? I'm saying, I clarified, my heart breaking with each word, that we cannot continue this. Not like this. You need to face your life, Su Xia. You need to make a choice, a real choice, not just seek temporary escape. His eyes, dark and stormy, searched mine, seeking a lie, a sign of wavering. He found none. My face, my posture, my very being, screamed a painful truth. You're breaking up with me, he said, the words a flat statement, not a question. His voice was barely audible, a fragile whisper. I met his gaze, my own eyes burning with unshed tears. I'm forcing you to choose, I corrected, my voice thick with emotion, between your gilded cage and your freedom. And until you make that choice, a real one, there can be no us. He stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief, then slowly a deep, agonizing hurt began to register. His lips trembled, his carefully constructed composure shattered. The elegant, sharp-tongued Su Xia, who navigated high society with effortless grace, dissolved before my eyes. You can't, he choked out, tears welling in his eyes. You can't do this to me. Not now. Not when I have nowhere else to go. You have yourself, Su Xia, I said, my voice gentle but firm. You always have, and you have the strength to fight for it. He shook his head, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down his cheek. He looked utterly lost, utterly abandoned. The pain in his eyes was a mirror of my own. Fine, he whispered, his voice laced with a cold, desperate anger. If that's what you want, if that's what you truly believe. He turned, his back ramrod straight, his shoulders shaking almost imperceptibly. He walked to the door, his movement stiff and mechanical like a puppet whose strings had been cut. He paused, his hand on the doorknob, but didn't look back. The jasmine scent, now heavy with sorrow and anger, lingered in the air. The click of the door closing echoed through my small apartment, a sound that tore through the very fabric of my being. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my body trembling, the silence deafening. The scent of his distress, of his departure, hung heavy, suffocating. I had done it. I had pushed him away. I had broken us. The agony was a physical thing, a gaping wound in my chest. But amidst the overwhelming pain, a tiny, fragile hope flickered that this brutal act of love, would ultimately set him free. The following weeks were a desolate blur. My apartment, once a sanctuary filled with the warmth of his presence, became a cold, empty shell. His scent, once a comfort, now a torment, slowly faded, leaving behind only the sterile smell of my own loneliness. I worked, ate, slept, but it felt like moving through water, each action requiring immense effort. The city, usually a vibrant hum of life, seemed muted, distant. I saw glimpses of him in the society pages, always with Dingfang. He looked thinner, paler. His eyes, in every photograph, held a haunted, faraway look. The polite smile was still there, but it was a brittle thing, ready to shatter. The articles spoke of their upcoming wedding, the grand preparations, the merging of empires. The celebratory tone felt like a cruel mockery. Rumors began to circulate, hushed whispers at first, then growing louder, more insistent. Su Xia was withdrawing. He canceled appearances, avoided social events. His sharp wit, once a hallmark of his personality, had dulled. He was seen less often, and when he was, his movements were slow, his gaze distant. His dominant omega pheromones, usually a vibrant, confident presence, were reportedly subdued, almost imperceptible. His friends, worried, tried to reach out. He rebuffed them, retreating further into himself. His family, caught up in the whirlwind of wedding preparations and strategic alliances, dismissed his mood as pre-wedding jitters, a natural reaction to the immense pressure. They saw his withdrawal as a temporary phase, an inconvenience to be managed. They didn't see the slow, agonizing spiral. I heard snippets from mutual acquaintances, hushed conversations in cafes, overheard whispers on the street. Su Xia isn't doing well. He looks unwell. He's lost so much weight. Each piece of information was a fresh stab to my heart. I wanted to reach out, to run to him, to pull him back from the brink. But I held back, a prisoner of my own agonizing decision. I had to let him fall, to feel the full impact of his fall, for him to find his own strength. He stopped taking calls, stopped responding to messages, he stopped eating, sometimes for days. His sleep was erratic, plagued by nightmares. The vibrant, confident Omega, who had once stood over me in the locker room, his voice clear and certain, was slowly fading. He was a ghost in his own life, moving through the opulent rooms of his family estate, a silent, suffering presence. His dominant Omega pheromones, once a source of pride and power, had become muted, almost imperceptible, a sign of his deep emotional distress. The lack of their usual vibrant scent worried even his oblivious family members, though they attributed it to stress. But I knew the depth of his pain. I had wounded him, deeply, irrevocably, for what I believed was his own good. And now, I could only watch from afar, helpless, as the man I loved spiraled into a depression that threatened to consume him whole. The silence between us was a chasm, vast and unbridgeable, filled with unspoken words and agonizing regret. I had forced him to face reality, and reality, it seemed, was tearing him apart. The world had become a muted tapestry of grays and blues for Su Xia. Days bled into nights, marked only by the shifting patterns of light and shadow on his bedroom ceiling. The opulent rooms of his family estate, once a testament to his lineage, now felt like a mausoleum, each gilded ornament a mocking reminder of the life he was expected to lead. Food, when he remembered to eat, tasted like ash. Sleep offered no respite, only a swirling vortex of anxieties and a recurring image of Xie Yan's unwavering gaze, the quiet resolve in his eyes as he delivered the final, crushing blow. His reflection in the antique mirror was a stranger. Cheeks, once elegantly sculpted, now hollowed. Eyes, once sharp and commanding, now sunken and dulled, rimmed with perpetual shadows. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if each step required immense effort. The vibrant jasmine scent, once his signature, had faded to a barely perceptible whisper, a ghost of its former self, a testament to the emotional desolation that consumed him. His family, caught in the frantic current of wedding preparations, dismissed his decline as typical prenuptial jitters, and Omega's delicate constitution buckling under pressure. Dingfang, with his cold, calculating efficiency, simply noted his fiancée's waning vitality with a detached annoyance, attributing it to a lack of proper rest. No one saw the true depth of his suffering. No one truly looked. The nausea began subtly, a faint queasiness that he attributed to his irregular eating habits and chronic stress. It escalated, becoming a constant companion, an unwelcome guest that churned his stomach with relentless persistence. He dismissed it as a symptom of his spiraling depression, another manifestation of his body betraying him. But then came the fatigue, a profound, bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of sleep could alleviate. His periods, once a predictable rhythm, had ceased entirely. He ignored the signs, burying his head deeper in the sand of his despair. He simply did not care enough to acknowledge them. One morning, a sharp, unfamiliar pain lanced through his lower abdomen. It was not the familiar ache of stress, nor the dull throb of hunger. This was different, a primal throb that demanded attention. A tremor of unease, the first in weeks, pierced through his apathy. He dragged himself to the bathroom, his reflection staring back at him, gaunt and pale. His hand instinctively went to his stomach, a faint roundness he hadn't noticed before, a subtle curve beneath the loose silk of his pajamas. A cold dread began to bloom in his chest, slowly, inexorably. He made an appointment with a private clinic, far from his family's usual medical network. Using an assumed name, the sterile white walls, the hushed whispers of the nurses, the antiseptic scent, it all felt unreal, a scene from a dream. The doctor, a kind-faced beta, spoke in gentle tones, her words a distant hum. The ultrasound one glided over his abdomen, a cool, gelled pressure. His eyes were fixed on the screen, a swirling kaleidoscope of grays and blacks. Then, a shape, a distinct, unmistakable shape, a tiny, pulsating flicker. 18 weeks, Mr. Su. The doctor's voice cut through the haze, calm and professional. You're nearly halfway there. Congratulations. The words hit him with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs. 18 weeks. Almost 5 months. A child. Xie Yan's child. The realization crashed over him, a tsunami of shock, terror, and a fragile, nascent hope. His entire world, already shattered, splintered into a million new pieces, then slowly, miraculously, began to reassemble itself into an entirely new, terrifying, and utterly beautiful form. His first instinct was a desperate, unreasoning panic. Dingfang. His family, the engagement, the scandal, his meticulously planned life, already a prison, would now become an inescapable hell. But beneath the terror, a different emotion, fierce and protective, began to stir. A tiny life, pulsating within him, entirely dependent on him. A life conceived in love, not obligation. A life that belonged to him and to Xie Yan. He left the clinic in a daze, the doctor's parting words about prenatal care and nutrition echoing in his ears. The city outside, once a blur of indifference, now assaulted his senses with a renewed intensity. The blare of horns, the rush of footsteps, the metallic tang of exhaust fumes. They all seemed sharper, more immediate. He stumbled into a taxi, giving the driver an address he hadn't spoken aloud in weeks. My address. The journey was a blur of frantic thoughts, a maelstrom of fear, and a desperate, burning need. He clutched his stomach, his hand instinctively shielding the precious secret within. The tears started then, hot and stinging, blurring his vision. Tears of fear, yes, but also tears of a profound, overwhelming relief. He wasn't alone. He had a reason to fight, a reason to live, a reason to choose. He arrived at my apartment building, the familiar, slightly dilapidated facade a beacon in the storm. His legs, weak from disuse and shock, threatened to give out. He fumbled with the intercom, his fingers trembling, pressing the button with a desperate urgency. I opened the door, my face etched with the familiar weariness of the past weeks. My eyes, usually guarded, widened in shock. Su Xia stood before me, a ghost in the dim hallway light, his expensive clothes disheveled, his face streaked with tears. His dominant omega pheromones, once almost imperceptible, now bloomed around him, thick with distress, but also with something else, something new, a vibrant, almost overwhelming scent of life. Xie Yan, he choked out, his voice raw, broken. He didn't wait for an invitation, didn't hesitate. He simply stumbled forward, collapsing into my arms. His body was trembling, racked with sobs. He buried his face in my chest, clutching at my shirt. The familiar jasmine scent now laced with the metallic tang of tears and that new, powerful, undeniable aroma of burgeoning life. I held him, my arms automatically wrapping around his shaking frame. The familiar pain of his presence, the ache of our separation, was instantly eclipsed by a surge of alarm. He was not just upset, he was broken, shattered. His entire body vibrated with a desperate urgency I had never witnessed before. Su Xia, what is it? I murmured, my voice thick with concern, my heart pounding against my ribs. I stroked his hair, trying to soothe him, trying to make sense of the overwhelming wave of emotion emanating from him. He pulled back slightly, his tear-streaked face looking up at me, his eyes wide and pleading. His hand, still trembling, reached for mine, guiding it to his lower abdomen. My fingers grazed the soft fabric of his shirt, feeling the subtle, undeniable roundness beneath. My breath hitched. The new scent, the one I hadn't quite identified, now slammed into my awareness with blinding clarity. His lips moved, forming words that were barely audible, choked by sobs. Our child. The world tilted. The air left my lungs in a silent gasp. My mind, usually so meticulously ordered, became a whirlwind of images. Our child. A tiny life, a rebellion, a miracle, a profound, undeniable truth. 18 weeks, the timeline, the implications, the sheer, impossible reality of it all, crashed over me. My own body, my recessive alpha instincts, which had so often been dismissed, now surged with a primal, overwhelming force. A fierce, protective roar, silent but potent, erupted within me. The past weeks, the self-imposed distance, the agonizing decision to push him away for his own good, it all evaporated in an instant. This was no longer about his choice, his freedom, his struggle. This was about our child. This was about our family. The fear, the pain, the self-doubt that had plagued me for weeks, for a lifetime, dissipated like smoke. In its place, a cold, unwavering resolve hardened in my core. No more hiding. No more secrets. No more allowing Dingfang or his family or society's expectations to dictate our lives. This child, our child, deserved a world free of shame, a life lived in the open, protected by both of its parents. I pulled Su Xia closer, my embrace fierce, possessive. He was no longer just the man I loved, he was the vessel of our future, fragile and precious. I pressed a kiss to his tear-soaked hair, inhaling the now vibrant, powerful scent of his omega pheromones, intertwined with the sweet, innocent scent of new life. We will face this, I vowed, my voice low, steady, imbued with a newfound strength. All of it, together. His sobs slowly subsided, replaced by shuddering breaths. He clung to me, his grip tight, as if I were the only anchor in a turbulent sea. His fear had not vanished, but now, a fragile hope, a desperate trust, began to bloom in his eyes. He had run to me, broken and terrified, and I had answered. I looked down at him, at the subtle curve of his belly beneath my hand. The weight of the world, the enormity of what lay ahead, settled upon my shoulders. But it was not a crushing weight. It was a burden I willingly embraced, a responsibility I would never shirk. My recessive alpha nature, once a source of shame, now thrummed with a fierce, protective power. I was not weak. I was not useless. I was a father. And I would protect my amiga and my child with every fiber of my being. The era of hiding was over. The fight had truly begun. The scent of Su Xia, now vibrant with the promise of life, clung to me. A potent elixir of fear and fierce resolve. His hand, still pressed against his abdomen, felt impossibly small, yet held the weight of our entire future. The tears that had streamed down his face had dried, leaving faint, salty tracks, but his eyes, though still red-rimmed, held a fragile, desperate hope. In that moment, the last vestiges of my self-doubt, the ingrained shame of being a recessive alpha, shattered. I was no longer merely Xie Yan, the bullied boy, the quiet accountant from the lower district. I was a father. I was a protector, and the man who had dared to threaten my family, who had wrapped Su Xia in a suffocating web of control, would pay. My revenge would not be a violent outburst, a foolish confrontation that would only confirm Dingfang's low opinion of me. It would be a meticulous, calculated dismantling, a quiet unraveling of his carefully constructed empire. Dingfang thrived on power, on control, on the unassailable fortress of his family's wealth and influence. I would attack that fortress from within, using the very tools he disdained: intelligence, patience, and the silent, relentless precision of a man with nothing left to lose. The first step was to stabilize Su Xia. He was still fragile, a delicate vessel carrying our future. I settled him onto my small sofa, bringing him a glass of water, a warm blanket. He watched me with wide, searching eyes, as if expecting me to vanish. But I was not going anywhere. My presence, steady and unwavering, was the only comfort I could offer him in that moment. I held his hand, tracing the delicate bones of his fingers, a silent promise hanging in the air. Once he had calmed his breathing evening out, I began to think. Dingfang's world was one of glass towers and intricate financial dealings. My world, though humble, had granted me a unique vantage point. My years as a junior accountant, sifting through ledgers and tax forms, had honed a particular skill: the ability to spot anomalies, to follow the faint scent of impropriety hidden within mountains of data. It was a skill Dingfang, with his broad stroke, heir-apparent approach, would never possess. He saw the grand picture. I saw the individual brushstrokes, the tiny imperfections that could unravel the whole. My investigation began subtly. I couldn't risk exposure. Dingfang's reach was vast, his network of informants pervasive. I started by gathering public information, poring over financial news, corporate reports, and industry analyses related to the Sterling Group. I spent late nights at a public library, far from my apartment, using their computers, wiping my browsing history with paranoid diligence. I devoured every article, every press release, every whisper of scandal, no matter how small, that had ever touched Dingfang or his family's conglomerate. The Sterling Group was a leviathan, its tentacles reaching into every sector: real estate, technology, manufacturing. Their public image was one of impeccable integrity, a pillar of the city's economy, but even the most polished facade could hide cracks. I focused on their subsidiaries, the smaller entities often overlooked in the grand scheme, where the less savory dealings might be tucked away. I created a new, encrypted email account, a ghost in the digital ether. I began reaching out to former employees of the Sterling Group, those who had left under a cloud, those with grievances, those who might harbor a secret resentment. I framed my inquiries carefully, vaguely, posing as an academic researcher, an independent journalist, never revealing my true identity or my true purpose. Most ignored me. Some responded with cautious, non-committal answers, but a few, fueled by old grudges or a flicker of conscience, offered tantalizing tidbits. One former mid-level manager, dismissed unceremoniously after a corporate restructuring, hinted at creative accounting practices in their overseas ventures. Another, a disgruntled IT specialist, spoke of a highly secure, segregated server, rumored to hold sensitive data that never saw the light of day in official reports. These were threads, faint but persistent, leading me deeper into the labyrinth. My days at the accounting firm became a cover. I performed my duties with meticulous efficiency, but my mind was elsewhere, sifting through the mental database I was building, connecting the dots. I cross-referenced public records with the hushed rumors, looking for discrepancies. The scale of the Sterling Group's operations was immense, but so was the potential for misdirection, for hiding illicit gains within legitimate transactions. I started with tax records. Large corporations, especially those with international holdings, often employed complex strategies to minimize their tax burden. Some strategies skirted the line of legality, others brazenly crossed it. I focused on their overseas subsidiaries, particularly those in countries with lax financial regulations. I learned about shell companies, intricate webs of holding firms designed to obscure ownership and funnel profits through untraceable channels. The embezzlement aspect was harder to pinpoint. It required access to internal financial statements, to detailed expenditure reports. This was where the disgruntled former employees became invaluable. One, a former financial analyst, had kept meticulous notes, a personal insurance policy against his unjust dismissal. He was hesitant at first, fearful of Dingfang's retribution, but my persistence, my quiet assurance that his anonymity would be preserved, slowly wore down his resistance. He sent me a trove of fragmented data, encrypted files, and cryptic warnings. I spent weeks decrypting, analyzing, and piecing together the fragmented information. My apartment, once a sanctuary, became a war room. Spreadsheets covered every surface, illuminated by the cold glow of my laptop screen. My eyes burned, my fingers ached, but the fire of determination fueled me. I found patterns, large, unexplained transfers to offshore accounts, inflated invoices for non-existent services, phantom employees drawing substantial salaries. Each discovery was a jolt, a chilling confirmation of the scale of Dingfang's deceit. The evidence mounted, undeniable and damning: embezzlement, tax evasion, money laundering, a systematic pattern of financial malfeasance that span years, enriching Dingfang and his inner circle, at the expense of shareholders, employees, and the public purse. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. Dingfang, secure in his position, had grown complacent, believing himself untouchable. Su Xia watched me during these weeks, his silence a palpable presence. He didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations. He simply observed, his eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and a growing, fragile trust. He knew I was doing something dangerous, something for us. His own health, though still delicate, showed subtle improvements. He ate more, slept a little better. The vibrant scent of life within him grew stronger, a constant reminder of the stakes. He would sometimes bring me tea, or a small, simple meal, placing it silently beside my overflowing desk, his touch a gentle reassurance. He understood. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. An anonymous tip to a financial watchdog blog, hinting at irregularities in a recent Sterling Group acquisition. The blog was small, but its editor, a tenacious beta with a reputation for integrity, was known to pursue leads relentlessly. I realized then that I didn't need to be the one to expose Dingfang directly. I needed to give the information to someone who would. Someone powerful enough to withstand Dingfang's retaliation, but independent enough to be unbought. I identified the Sterling Group's fiercest rival, the Obsidian Group, led by the ruthless, brilliant Alpha CEO, Xie Yan. Shen and Dingfang had a long-standing, intensely competitive relationship, a rivalry that bordered on personal enmity. Shen was known for his aggressive business tactics, his willingness to exploit any weakness in his competitors. He was not a moral man, but he was a strategic one. He would recognize the value of the information I possessed. Crafting the package was an art form. It had to be undeniable, irrefutable, yet untraceable back to me. I compiled the key documents, the irrefutable proof of embezzlement and tax evasion, bank statements, forged invoices, shell company registrations, and a detailed analysis of the financial flows. I created a concise, compelling narrative, outlining the scheme, highlighting the most egregious examples. I stripped away any identifying markers, scrubbed the metadata from the digital files, and used multiple layers of encryption. The delivery had to be precise. I couldn't risk mailing it, couldn't risk a digital trace. I chose a neutral drop-off point, a crowded, anonymous coffee shop in the financial district, during peak rush hour. I used a burner phone to send an anonymous, encrypted message to Xie Yan's executive assistant, detailing the location and a time window. Then I left the flash drive disguised as a generic promotional item on a designated table, blending seamlessly back into the bustling crowd. The waiting was the hardest part. Days turned into a week, then another. The city hummed with its usual indifference. Su Xia's engagement to Dingfang still dominated the society pages, the wedding date looming closer. His family continued their oblivious preparations, blind to the storm gathering on the horizon. Then, the whispers began. Not in the society columns, but in the financial press. Small, cautious articles, hinting at unconfirmed rumors of financial irregularities within the Sterling Group. The whispers grew louder, fueled by the tenacious editor of the financial watchdog blog, who had clearly received his own corroborating information. The stock market reacted, a subtle tremor at first, then a more pronounced dip in Sterling Group shares. Xie Yan had acted. He had verified the information, and now he was unleashing his own powerful resources to exploit Dingfang's vulnerability. The media, sensing blood in the water, descended. Investigative journalists, financial analysts, and corporate lawyers swarmed the Sterling Group, demanding answers. The scandal exploded. The Sterling Group's carefully cultivated image of integrity shattered. Headlines screamed about corporate fraud, tax evasion, and a massive embezzlement scheme orchestrated by Dingfang himself. The evidence, once a hidden secret, was now splashed across every news outlet. Undeniable and damning. Public outrage mounted. Shareholders panicked. Their investments plummeting. Banks began to call in loans. Dingfang's world, built on a foundation of inherited power and ruthless ambition, began to crumble. His name, once synonymous with prestige, became a byword for corruption. The engagement, once touted as the merger of two powerful dynasties, became a liability. Su Xia's family, their reputation now irrevocably stained by association, moved quickly to sever ties. The engagement was officially, and humiliatingly, broken. The public statement cited irreconcilable differences and a desire to protect Su Xia from the ongoing turmoil. It was a flimsy excuse, but it served its purpose. Dingfang, the cold, strategic alpha, was utterly exposed, his empire collapsing around him. The legal repercussions would be immense, the financial ruin absolute. His downfall was not a violent spectacle, but a quiet implosion. A strategic dismantling that left him with nothing but the ruins of his ambition. My revenge was complete. It was cold, precise, and utterly devastating. When the news of the broken engagement broke, Su Xia was with me. He had been restless all day, a nervous energy thrumming beneath his skin. We watched the news report together, his hand gripping mine, his eyes fixed on the screen as the newscaster detailed Dingfang's spectacular downfall. His face was pale, his lips parted in a silent gasp. The relief that washed over him was almost tangible, a wave of tension visibly draining from his body. His dominant omega pheromones, for the first time in months, settled into a calm, almost joyful hum. He looked at me then, his eyes brimming with unshed tears, a mixture of awe, gratitude, and a profound, wordless understanding. He knew. He didn't need to ask how I had done it. He simply knew that I had fought for him, for us, with a quiet strength that transcended the labels of Alpha and Omega. I pulled him into my arms, holding him close, feeling the steady beat of his heart against my own, the subtle, insistent thrum of our child within him. The fear was gone, replaced by a deep, abiding peace. Our future, once a distant, impossible dream, now lay before us, uncertain perhaps, but finally, undeniably ours to build. No more hiding, no more fear. Just us.